Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this new webinar on contrast-enhanced ultrasound in the radiology department. So before getting started, I'd like to thank Bracco for fully funding tonight's course. Bracco commitment to education has been relentless for decades in many fields of medical imaging, which contributes to knowledge sharing within the community and also to smooth adoption of innovations. A big thank you then also to the whole team at Bracco UK, which is led by Mrs. Susan Oldham. Now starting, I must inform you that the webinar will be recorded and that it will be made available online in the upcoming days. It will take a couple of days for you to be able to watch it again. If you have questions, they are of course welcome. So you can ask them by using the Q&A button, which is at the bottom of your screen on Zoom. You can ask your question during the lectures if this is a burning question, or at the end of the webinar, because there will be a dedicated Q&A session. Let me introduce you our moderator now, Professor Adrian Lim. Adrian is a professor and consultant radiologist at Imperial College London and Healthcare NHS Trust. He is also the current president of British Medical Ultrasound Society and an executive board member of the European Federation of Societies for Ultrasound in Medicine and Biology. He's been working with ultrasound contrast for over 20 years, which has been the mainstay of his research, particularly with respect to liver imaging, but also in the novel applications of contrast ultrasound and its translation into clinical practice. He will introduce tonight's course and guide us through the whole program. So Adrian, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Jerome, and hope you can see my screen here now. And welcome to this webinar this evening on contrast-enhanced ultrasound. Thank you to Bracco for sponsoring such an event, and also thank you to the forthcoming expert speakers who will be giving us tips and tricks on how to utilize contrast in the radiology department. I would like to just start off by giving you some background about contrast if you're not so familiar with it, and would like to draw your attention to this recent paper published in Medicine on Medical Ultrasonics on the history of contrast ultrasound. And what it shows here is how long contrast has been around in the community for us to use, dating back to nearly 1999 and 2000. But the mainstay of contrast within Europe you'll see is Sonoview, also known as Lumoson, produced by Bracco, and Lumoson is its trade name in the US. And it's been the mainstay, and for most of us, this will be the main contrast agent used in radiological departments that we use today. One thing to let you know about safety of contrast, and I've just chosen a couple of papers for you with large studies. Here, the Italian group looking at 23,000 contrast cases and another 30,000 contrast cases. You can see that the adverse events were very, very small in the range of 0.0086% and 0.007% respectively. So very, very safe to use, really, and as non-nephrotoxic on its own. It has been a challenge over the years from the ultrasound manufacturers to actually visualize where these contrasts is. And now we've actually managed to separate out the contrast agents from the grayscale itself on our B-mode image, as you'll see. And so the split screen image you'll see has been taken many years of improvements by our manufacturing colleagues to improve the scanners that we use. But if you were interested to look at the sort of pulse sequences that are utilized to visualize contrast and that are necessary to visualize contrast, and this paper, a review paper looking at the imaging methods, is a very nice paper and tells you all you can use contrast for. The other papers that I would recommend to you are the guidelines and good clinical practice recommendations for CUS, produced by WFM and FSM, two society papers which are free to download. These two papers were the first two to appear in 2012 and 2011. They're split into liver applications and then non-liver applications or non-hepatic applications. The hepatic applications was updated in 2017, and the liver applications was recently updated in 2020. And these are by a list of panel of worldwide experts coming together to provide some guidelines and recommendations. Just to let you know what you can use contrast for, and we'll hear more about it in detail this evening. Typically, it's used for liver lesion characterization and detection in radiological departments, but now also more renal and spleen liver lesion characterization. And here, I'm just going to start this video clip showing you the split screen mode. So on the left-hand side is where your contrast is, and this is your grayscale localizer. And what you can see is a hypoechoic lesion, but very quickly, this peripheral nodular enhancement, you know that this is a hemangioma within seconds, much faster than you'll be able to do a CT or MRI scan. Conversely, in this patient with this indeterminate nodule within the interpolar region of the kidney, you'll just see whether the key thing here is whether it takes up contrast or not, and it's an enhancing lesion. Here comes the contrast, and you can actually see contrast enhancing this lesion itself. So it's a very avidly enhancing lesion in the arterial phase and has to be assumed malignant until proven otherwise. Very useful in vascular work, and we'll hear some details later today on EVARs, but can also be used as Doppler rescue. And don't forget, in the vascular work, is also used a lot by our cardiology colleagues for the echocardiography work. Has been shown to be useful in trauma and intervention, and particularly at the bedside in the ER department. Some departments utilize this very quickly to assess for any hemorrhages that they can spot quickly. Coming more and more into its use is in pediatrics, and now it certainly is one of the key applications of this in pediatrics is that it is much easier to do in this population than MRI and CT, and very, very safe as well. There are some niche applications for the pediatrics. It can be used to look at vesicoureteric reflux, and there are some other novel applications. And this last video clip that I wanted to show you is actually, by fortune, these microbubbles can also be taken by the lymphatic system. And here's an intradermal injection into the pereolar region of the breast, and you can see a breast cancer. But this is actually contrast within the lymphatic system itself. And so you can actually visualize this as it drains into the central lymph node. So just giving you a flavor of what contrast ultrasound can be used for and how useful it can be in its whole variety of applications, but also typically in the radiology department, we will be using it to problem solve for those indeterminate lesions on ultrasound and those small lesions you can't quite properly characterize with CT and MRI. So what are the benefits? Well, as I said before, it is non-nephrotoxic and doesn't involve any ionizing radiation. And when compared with CT and MRI, the real-time contrast enhancement evaluation, particularly in the 0 to 30-second phase, which you can't quite capture so well on CT or MRI, we can see it in real time, is really, really useful, particularly to where there's improved resolution of the sub-centimeter lesions, which we see better on ultrasound than the other modalities. And of course, it's also a better patient experience, and it's cheaper than MRI and CT. For some more papers that have come through, it's recommended by NICE. This was produced in 2013, and their assessment of this showed that for characterizing focal liver lesions or detecting metastases, contrast-enhanced ultrasound was no different from CT or MRI scan. And some papers have shown how cost-effective it can be if you utilize this to discriminate your focal liver lesion and characterize it instead of using CT and MRI, a cost saving of nearly half when you compare it with CT and a third when you compare it with MRI. And this last paper, produced by Megan O'Brien and some NHS colleagues, showed that a modeling would be that you could save the NHS or save a lot of money in a modeling standard if you utilize a CUS to characterize your focal liver lesion. You see at 5%, you're saving nearly $250,000 for the NHS. But if you increase that to nearly 90%, then you're saving millions when you, instead of using CT or MRI for characterization. So with that, I hope I've given you a flavor as to what to expect for the evening. There are some very renowned speakers